What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
The More Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online. You're now watching the UK's only alternative late-night talk show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with Dr. David Jacobs, who was an associate professor of history at Temple University, specializing in 20th century American history and culture. Now, he began researching the controversy over unidentified flying objects in America in the mid-1960s, and has amassed over 35 years of primary research and data. Now, Dr. David Jacobs has written and delivered many articles, papers, and addresses on the subject of UFO abduction, and has been a consultant to the majority of UFO organizations. In recent years, he has concentrated on ascertaining the proper methodology and techniques for the hypnosis and therapy of abductees. Dr. David Jacobs, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate your having me.
David, it is such a privilege to have you on because your work, is just incredible. Now, just for the audience, just tell us a little bit about yourself. How long you've been in this field of ufology for, and how you first got into it as well.
I don't know how I first got into it, but it was somewhere in 1965, 1966. When I was an undergraduate at the University of California at Los Angeles. As a graduate student at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, I was very much into it, even though I didn't let on to many people, but I was extremely fascinated by it. I joined UFO organizations. I was doing field work, investigating UFO sightings and so forth. I wound up writing my doctoral dissertation on the controversy over unidentified flying objects in the United States from 1896 to 1972 or 3 or something like that. That was later published as a book by Indiana University Press. I stuck with it, looking at the outside shells of objects, UFOs, and in 1982, I met a person named Bud Hopkins, who was a major abduction researcher. I had not that much interested in the abductions. To me, there was a good possibility they were psychological. I continued. I became friends with Bud Hopkins, who introduced me to abductees, showed me what he was doing. I knew that there was something there very quickly. In 1986, I started doing hypnosis with abductees, and I've been doing that ever since. So in essence, almost my entire adult life, with the exception of a couple of years, has been devoted to the abduction phenomenon. And I'm not sure if I'm better off or not better off having done that.
Well, I think you've written some fantastic books. I really, really do. And we're just putting those books on the screen now as we speak. And your latest book, Walking Among Us, The Alien Plan to Control Humanity. What a fascinating book, just as all your books are. But this one, obviously, would be in the latest one. Now, let's get straight into it.
The title is slightly embarrassing, even though I'm the one who thought of Walking Among Us, and the subtitle was the publisher's. It's still embarrassing.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth in it, potentially, and we'll get into that. Do you find that embarrassing because, having one sort of part of yourself in the science field and what your peers think of you, or what is the reason for that?
No, it's just plain crazy. You can't get around that. Well, most people think of this as just totally psychologically rooted. It's mental problems gone awry.
But that doesn't escape the truth, though, does it? That it doesn't take you away from the truth of what you've discovered, neither, and the truth of those having these actual real experiences. That's the difference here. These are real experiences for these people. Now, yes, there's those that want the fame and they want to get on TV and they want to, whatever they're looking for. But there are the genuine cases where this is unexplainable, and that's what we're going to look at today.
Well, what I didn't say is that I was professor of American history, 20th century U.S. history at Temple University in Philadelphia, and also for a year at the University of Nebraska. And I'm retired now. So I spent from 1974 to 2011 as a regular professor of history.
Yes.
If there was the slightest indication that this was simply a phenomenon of abductions that was psychological or mental or whatever it is coming out of a person's mind, I would not have stuck with it. Obviously, I would have dropped this immediately.
Yes.
and trumpeted the fact that it was all psychological. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out to be that way, and I just kept studying it, and historians look for change over time to a certain extent.
Yes.
I found change over time. I found all the aspects of a real phenomenon and none of the aspects of a purely psychological phenomenon.
No, absolutely, and again, your credibility with your background, it really helps with doing this work as well. I mean, there's been others that have done this work, and I think you could say that your research sort of aligns with each other. That's the crazy part of this as well. So,
well, yes and no.
Yeah.
The fact is, though, that when others do this research, there's no particular standards for how to do this.
No.
There's no scheme of things. There's no book showing you how to do hypnosis with abductees, which I'm saying that because I'm going to be writing a book with that title, I hope, or something like it, to standardize the field. And there's a lot of people who have different agendas, who have religious agendas or transformational or spiritual or whatever, and they can, in fact, allow their subjects to indulge in that, and then it comes out as a kind of reality. And I don't do that. I'm looking just strictly for what happened and not anything spiritual or transformational.
Of course, but then, we are dealing with the consciousness here as well. And, man does not understand that part of it yet. We do not understand where the consciousness comes from. And we have theories about where it may come from, but there may be a bigger picture here as well in that respect.
Mine is severely lacking. That's all I know.
Well, we will see.
I sometimes have consciousness, and most of the time I don't.
Well, you must be, consciously evolved to have got to this point. And also, I would say you've expanded your consciousness with having to go beyond that which you thought was the norm as well.
Yes, the phenomenon took me places I did not want to go. I must say that. But you have to remember, when you're dealing with consciousness, the abduction phenomenon, the evidence for it is for the UK, I will say, a cricket bat between the eyes. It is not subtle. It is people being abducted in groups and can confirm each other's abductions. It is people seeing other people at random. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen once in a while, and recognizing each other from being on a UFO, both of them being abductees.
That's incredible.
Both of them remembering. It is people physically missing from their normal environments when they are abducted. Police have been called, search parties sent out, children search for their parents search for their children, that sort of stuff. And there's, when people return from abduction events, they return with unusual marks and scars on their body that weren't there before. And I just said the word scars. Fully formed scars, scar tissue that wasn't there the day before, a biological impossibility that I have seen with my eyes open and with my jaw on the floor, I must say. But it's, in other words, I worked with a woman who one day and the next day she came back to my home office here, and she showed me these scars she had on her hands. There were fully formed scars that were not there the day before. That is just not possible. It's not possible.
No, that's right. That's when you know there's something more to this as well, with just anecdotes like that, let alone all the rest of the evidence that you've been collecting over the years. Well, let's just go. There's so much we're going to be talking about here, but in a short amount of time. Let's go straight into it. Let's go into the alien abductions and the program as far as you understand it.
Well, I have to ease into that. The phenomenon itself, we've known about since 1957. The very first case was in Brazil, and it's a person who became an attorney later on. It was a student at the time, although everybody thought he was an illiterate Brazilian peasant for many years, but it turned out that was totally not true. He was required to have sexual relations with a female who looked quite human. It was so embarrassing, UFO researchers refused to publicize that or publish it until 1966 because they couldn't, that was crazy. In virtually every other abduction event that we've looked at, that sort of reproductive aspect has been present. Bud Hawkins, my colleague, discovered the fact that people were dealing with babies. We're having to deal with weird-looking babies who look sort of half human, half alien. This was in the 1980s. And from that point on, he called them hybrids, incidentally. And we learned that people were dealing with babies. They were dealing with toddlers, with older children, with adolescents, with young adults, with adults, but not with older adults for reasons that we do not understand. I mean, 70, 60, whatever, 80, but we don't see those. My first book on the subject was called Secret Life, which came out in 1992, and that it took people on a day, on a minute-by-minute, essentially, a typical abduction event, where people were placed on a table, and this was down to them, and there was this examination. My sense of what was going on was that they were interested in us. They were examining us. They wanted to know what made us tick. That turns out to be totally untrue. That was not right. That was incorrect. Everybody thought that at the time who was interested in this subject, but that turned out to be not correct. In my next book called The Threat, which came out in 1998, or 97 rather, that was a situation where I understood now that the hybrids were the essence of what this phenomenon was about. Hybrids were a combination of alien, human, who looked sometimes quite alien, but oftentimes more and more human. There were different types, and until some that looked really quite human. In the threat, I uncovered something that was extremely odd. The gray aliens would say, they would take somebody into a room, let's just say, have them look at a picture, a screen-like device on the wall. And here's a group of people. This is an actual event. I have several of them like this, where maybe maybe 12 or 15 people are standing in tiers, like standing on the steps for a school portrait or something. And the person hears in their mind, all communication is telepathic. I can talk about that too, and the meaning of that in a second. But they hear in their mind, can you tell the difference between us and you? The person looks up at the screen and says, I don't understand the question. What do you mean the difference? Everybody is exactly the same. What do you mean? And then they hear in their minds, see, isn't that wonderful? Soon we will all be together. Soon everyone will know his place. Soon it's going to be just wonderful. And that would be it. Then they would say, soon there's going to be a change coming. It would be a change. And a lot of abductees started talking about this. There's going to be this change soon. Nobody knew what the change was. And I asked people, well, what do you think they meant by soon? Because soon is, let's just say, a relative term. Yes. It could be 10 minutes. It could be 10,000 years, depending on them. Nobody knew. In 2003, I began to hear things that I had never heard before. This is the way it is with hypnosis with abductees. I've looked at 1,150 different abduction events and with about 150 people, and I've worked with some of these people for a couple of decades, actually. But what goes through my mind, there is a room just behind me where there's a little day bed, and there's a coffee table between me, and I'm sitting in a chair with my feet up on a radiator. This is a house built in 1880. And the only thing that goes through my mind is stay awake, don't fall asleep, stay awake, stay awake, stay awake. Because I've heard the same things over and over and over and over and over again. That's what you want, because everybody's having the same experiences. People are not, it's not idiosyncratic, it's not going off into crazy directions, it's all the same. Starting in 2003, I began to hear some stuff that was not the same, that was different. Stuff I hadn't heard before. For example, this guy I was working with, a man in his 50s who was a businessman who had never heard of me before. He was referred to me by a psychiatrist. He didn't know anything about the UFO abduction phenomenon, period. He began to, after the fourth session we had, he said, you know, I have a friend. You know, I forgot all about him. I have a friend. His name is Eric, and he's my best friend. I totally forgot about him. His friend he saw all the time, and he didn't know his friend's name. He calls him Eric, but he didn't know his actual name or his last name. Didn't know whether he was married or not. Didn't know where he worked. Didn't know where he lived. Didn't know anything about him. But he was his best friend, which of course is nonsensical. So he tells me about how they got on. They would go on a fishing trip. They went to different countries. They did this. That's not evidence. The evidence is when other people begin to say the same thing who are unaware of this kind of testimony. shortly thereafter, I began to hear other people saying similar things, how they're dealing with this strange person who they have named in some way. And they were doing this and they were doing that, and they were teaching them this and teaching them that. Then another person said that, and another person, then another person,
Wow.
then another person.
And these people didn't know each other at all.
No, well, they knew. I have get-togethers, so they know each other, but they don't know each other's stories.
No,
we
that's what I
don't
mean.
talk about. But the fact is, though, my sense was that this could be the change that that these beings have been talking about. I don't know, but I do know that this was different. And then people began to talk about helping them learn how to shop, how to buy things at a store, teaching them how to drive, going to their apartments and helping them in their apartments or flats, and teaching them all sorts of things about living here on Earth. But the difference was these beings were living in apartments, in flats. They were already there, and they were using the abductees to help them get adjusted to a totally different society than the society they grew up on a UFO.
Right, can I just ask one question? Was this under hypnosis if this information was coming through?
Yes and no. With one person, I worked with Betsy, who's sort of the star of the book. I worked with her in person doing hypnosis. Then I worked with her on the phone. And then I just worked with her through instant messaging with no hypnosis really whatsoever. And she could remember what was going on. She was so used to the process. Now, here's the problem with hypnosis. Hypnosis doesn't mean much. Not with me. It's mainly relaxation techniques. I want you to relax your muscles, relax this, relax that, relax, relax, relax. Now we're going to go to a special place. It'll be a few steps down to this beach area. It's going to be, you feel really, really relaxed. Then I start asking questions. They'll say to me sometimes, David, I don't think I'm hypnotized. And I'll say, doesn't matter. Lay back down. It's okay. Doesn't matter. And it doesn't. And I know that in the first session, I'll ask them some questions, and I know that they're thinking, that's the stupidest question I ever heard in my life. Should I answer that or not? While they're lying there. They're in total and complete control of everything. They don't think that they're a teapot or something.
No.
I made them think that they're a chicken and running around clucking. It's nothing like that. They'll say to me, David, I've got to go to the loo. Can I do that? And sure. They go to the loo, come back, lay down, and I just keep asking the questions. It doesn't matter. The key thing is just to open up the gates. I do not know how this works neurologically, but once it happens, they begin to remember. Now,
incredible. The
problem here is that their own thoughts, their own images, and their own dreams get mixed up in the UFO experience, in the abduction experience. And so in the first couple of sessions, you get a lot of what's called confabulation. I teach them how not to confabulate by simply asking logical and chronological questions. Let's just say it's an abduction at night. And they're laying in bed. They realize there's a light in the room. Okay, I say, well, you mean is the room completely infused with light, or is it just a stream of light? What kind of light is it? It's a question about, they've said it, now I can ask questions about it. So they answer that. And I say, now there's beings in the room. You say beings. You mean there's more than one? Yes, there's one on my bottom of the bed, and one off to the side, and one by the window. Oh, so there's three. Yes, okay. So what happens next? Well, they're getting me out of bed. I say, well, when you say getting you out of bed, do you mean you're getting out of bed and they're helping you, or are they getting you out of bed by floating you out of the bed, or whatever, No, I'm getting up myself. That's chronological and logical. You would be surprised how people who don't know how to do this can't do that. But there's an interesting thing I learned early on. They say, okay, they're walking me over to the window, and there's this light coming into the window, and I'm going right through the window into the air. I say, oh, wait a minute. When you get to the window and you're about to go out, do you open the window? They say, no, I don't open the window. I say, well, do these beings open the window? No. Well, does the window open by itself in some bizarre way? No. They say, I think I'm floating right through the closed window. Now, if this was psychological, they'd say, of course I open the window. Because by not opening that window, they are placing a barrier for belief in their own psychology. Why do that? They wouldn't do that. It's natural to open the window and then go through it. Nobody opens the window. I once had a person say that to me and look at me and say, has anybody else ever report that? I already had hundreds of cases of that.
Yeah. Saying the same thing. They don't know each other from different parts of the world, and they're all saying the same thing. Yeah. With a technology that we don't understand by the sound of it. To do that, obviously.
It's not only that, but it militates. The story itself militates against it being psychological.
Yes, exactly. Yes, yeah. From that point of view, of course, that's important as well for the peers listening. That look into your work. Yeah, absolutely.
So there's chronological and logical questioning, and when that happens, after about the third session, they're keyed into it, and they're careful about what they remember and how and where they're going and how they're. If they go out from a room into a hallway where they're turning right or turning left and things like that, and they get it, and they become sort of like scientist observers reporting back to us on what is happening. So yes, it is hypnosis. It's more relaxation techniques, but ultimately it's just getting a person to focus in and remember. Of course. How that works, we do not know.
Well, that's what I was saying earlier on about the idea of what our understanding of consciousness. We don't really know, do we? We don't have the full picture. We don't.
This is, I think, just a neurological blockage of short-term memory. They cannot access long-term memories. And the events are laid down in long-term memory, and they just can't access it. Or else, whatever it is, it's a memory. It's stored in a certain area of the brain that they can't access.
And it's blocked somehow, isn't it? That's right. Okay, just a very quick question as well. Have you ever tried communicating through the client to the entities in the room to speak to them? I know that sounds a bit crazy, but it is. I know, but there's others that have done it, and communication has taken place. And I'll mention one, Dolores Cannon.
Correct. Yeah. That's the problem with hypnosis that is not good hypnosis. You can't ask somebody to ask a question of aliens as if it's happening in real time while they're laying on my daybed at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when I know they're not being abducted. You're calling for them to make something up. You're calling for confabulation.
Well, that's if we understand time as we think we understand it.
There's no reason to go into extreme ideas of what's going on. This is a phenomenon that is happening in real time with real people by real aliens, in my opinion. And going to asking questions about of aliens, which is completely against everything we know about the abduction phenomenon. Everything.
Okay, fair enough. But I mean, in regards to the abduction phenomena, we don't know where they're coming from as well. I mean, are these interdimensional beings? If that's the case, well, that blows up a lot of questions, doesn't it? In the sense, how many dimensions are there? Is it infinitive? What's their, what is their purpose in the sense, and where do they come from? I mean, that they are big questions as well. I mean, there was always the thinking that they came from our own system, but maybe, with the multiverse ideas and everything else, they don't. Maybe our understanding of physics as it is very simple at this stage right now in our evolution.
If they can just do something simple like take somebody through a wall or a window, our understanding of physics cannot account for that at this point. If they are invisible, which they are most of the time, although people see abductions, in order for them to do what they're doing and having done it with a degree of certainty most of the 20th century, and we can extrapolate into the late 19th century, if they can do what they're doing for that long, they have extremely advanced technology, automatically, absolutely, positively, and that is required because our technology is brand new. They can't have the same kind of technology and physics and all the rest of that stuff, all those things. Having said that, asking questions has led nowhere. I read that stuff and my brain just turns over in its cradle, so to speak. It's like, oh my God, this is awful stuff. And it's nothing that neither I or Bud Hopkins or other serious researchers, Yvonne Smith, have found.
No.
It's only people with an agenda. That's the problem. Now, the question is, where are they from? Don't know, don't care. The other question is, how did they get here? Don't know, don't care. The only question for us and for the scientific community, people are interested in this, is, are they here or not? And what are they doing here? Those are the two questions. The main one is, are they here or not? Everything else stems from that.
I suppose so. I mean, the only reason I've mentioned some of the things I have is because if obviously they're here, the realms of possibilities of looking into these other questions, it's almost as though, well, maybe everything's open for debate here in a sense. That's the only reason why I'm mentioning that to just shut it off in a way is a good practice, I think, because like you say that we are here, just your research is here in just one direction, they are here. What is the outcome of that, of what's going on with the people that you've been researching all these years? But it does also tend to look at it as well that, well, what are the possibilities? I mean, we just don't understand it, do we?
Yeah, the speculation is something that I try to stay away from. I try to stick to what people are saying all together over and over and over again, and that has led me to conclusions that I think are going to be fairly important.
Okay, so what is a normal abduction in a sense? What are they taking away from a woman or a man?
Well, as I said before, there is a reproductive aspect to this, and there was a famous case here in the United States, the Barney and Betty Hill case in 1961. They took sperm from Barney, who was so embarrassed about this that when a book was written about the two of their experiences, the two of them, he had the author take that out of the book. Thank God for that, because every guy says they took sperm from him, and you can't say, well, they picked it up from the original case, Barney and Betty Hill. So, but they did it to Barney. They injected a needle into Betty's navel, saying that this was a pregnancy test. They didn't actually say that. The chances of them saying this is a pregnancy test are close to zero. Yeah. Close to zero. This is confabulation, because all communication on board is telepathic. And if it's telepathic, what's to prevent a person from listening to their own thoughts and thinking it's coming in from the outside? And the answer is nothing prevents that. They do it all the time, especially in the very beginning when they don't know how to adjust their brains to what's happening. That was confabulation, in my opinion. Right. Because it was only said by her and never to anybody else. It's not a good sign. We should have heard that 1,000 million times. But we know the procedure. The procedure is needle in the navel, probably angling over towards an ovary and taking follicles out. So there is this reproductive aspect, and this happens all the time. After they remove ovaries from a woman's sperm from a guy, they then put in into the woman's uterus or some other area sometimes an embryo or a fetus. The woman then thinks she might be pregnant. She's not sure. Sometimes there's no reason to be pregnant because there's a certain process that has to happen that gets somebody pregnant. And that process hasn't happened in the past 15 years.
Yeah.
So they can't be pregnant.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but yet they miss their period, and they might even miss 2 periods, and they'll take an early pregnancy test, and it's positive. But that can't be possible. That is not possible. So they go to the doctor and have a blood test, and it's positive. And he says, congratulations, you're pregnant, And they say, what? That's nuts. And then they wake up a week or so later, and a couple of weeks later, they say, oh, I'm not pregnant. Oh, false alarm.
Yeah.
At around 9 to 11 weeks, these beings remove the fetus and then place it into a tank of nutrients, a gestation tank, essentially. The gestation tank is the primary, for the next several months, is the primary home for the fetuses. The fetuses are removed, the babies are then removed, and that's when abductees see them, and there's once again a difference in how they look depending on how human and how alien they are, because when the sperm and eggs are taken, there's an alteration made, and we don't know what or how. I'm going to say, which includes alien DNA, not knowing if aliens have DNA. I don't know that, but I'm guessing, which makes this zygote, this gamete, different than other things, and therefore it's a hybrid.
Wow.
The point of the abduction phenomenon is to produce hybrids. That is the reason they are here. Why they are producing hybrids, which is even another reason they are here, we now know. We've learned that. Why they are producing, why the next step, why they're doing it for the next step, we don't know. We don't know the ultimate whys. Now, once again, if this were psychological, people would make up the ultimate whys. Why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? They'd make it up because they're making everything else up. What's the difference? Yes. But nobody knows, and we don't know. So that's what happens. There are examinations on tables. I used to think they were looking to see what made us tick. They were interested in us. They were experimenting. That turns out not to be true. I thought they were interested in human sexual response. That turns out to be not to be true. As the evidence mounted, I realized I was off base here and so forth. So the point is, though, that the interesting thing here is this is a global phenomenon. The United States does not have a corner on the abduction market.
No, it's culturally everywhere, isn't it?
It is everywhere. It is anywhere. It is in Japan. It is in China. It's in. I did a session with a person from the West African country of Mali, South Africa. All through South America, Canada, Europe, obviously, it does not matter. The amount of time and energy that these beings have put into this program is absolutely mind-boggling. It is astounding. They have been doing this for a number of years, since with a high degree of certainty, the 1920s, with a lesser degree of certainty, the 19-teens, and with guesswork, as I said before, the last quarter of the 19th century, around the world. And therefore, this program is extremely important to them.
Yes. And wow. Okay. With this program as well, when you've taken these patients down and they're under regression, or using hypnosis, so they've never come forward to say what the end game is for this through. No. Okay.
Don't know it. I wish I did. If I knew it, I could say, my God, I've actually done something of great importance. I figured the whole darn thing out myself.
Do they have our best intention?
They have their best intentions. They are here for a reason. Whatever that reason is, it benefits them. They do not have the milk of human kindness running by the court in every vein, to use a phrase out of My Fair Lady, and this is all about them and not about us. It's all about them living here. Now, the phenomenon is intergenerational. If a person is an abductee, their mother or their father or both were abductees. When they get married to a non-abductee, and most people are non-abductees, and when they get married to a non-abductee, and they have 2 kids or 3 kids or 5 kids, all the kids will be abductees. And then when they get married, all their children will be abductees down through the generations. Consequently, it keeps pace with population expansion.
That's incredible.
But at the same time, it also offers the opportunity for them to grow and grow and grow in terms of being abductees. And the question is why? Well, what you have is, with the population expansion, you have a growing number of people who are getting abducted. Therefore, there must be greater numbers of beings in the workforce, as I call it, to process abductees. Therefore, there must be ultimately more UFOs, more this, more that, and that is exactly what we see, in my opinion. That the entire thing is expanding with the population. The number of people who are being abducted is growing, and this is a very, very serious situation.
Yes.
In my opinion, this is an existential threat to the human race. This is, if I may speak grandly here, which had never occurred to me in my life. I would be saying things like this, but I do think that this actually is a legitimate existential threat, and because you're dealing with a very advanced technological society. And incidentally, to answer your question from earlier, to bring up another point, if the space-time continuum was different and they knew more about it, people would not know they were being abducted at all, and it would only take a second or so for abductions. But people are abducted in real time, and people see them coming back and this and that, and that wouldn't happen if the space-time continuum was different for them. Because the phenomenon is clandestine, it is secret, and secrecy must be prevented at all. It must be continued at all times. Without it, it would never happen, and yet people do know it because they are not all powerful.
A lot of abductees report as well that time standing still when the phenomena happens. It's almost like there's no sounds, there's no bursts, there's nothing. It's almost like it's their own individual private experience when they recall the first part of the UFOs appearing. They may not recall the being conscious, recall the abduction, but they do recall the quietness.
Yes, that does happen, and the question is it true or not? Because confabulation plays a role here. But people, when they remember things, they'll remember. The abduction phenomenon goes from A to Z.
Yeah. The funny thing was, when I was younger, my whole family had a UFO experience just like that, and we don't talk about it. But when I went under a regression, I was actually abducted under regression. Now, I came out of that regression thinking, I felt so silly. I felt like I made it all up. Yeah.
Right.
Mind you, he said they all say that. But as time's gone on and I've thought about it more, and then my sister took a picture at the time. She drew a picture, when she was younger, and she found it just recently. So we know it really happened, but no one talks about it. It's almost like we're blocked out from talking about it as a family. But yeah, I've got some experience, shall I say.
Okay, that's extremely common, not talking about it. I once talked to a guy who, it's very common. Here's one where I did not do, I was in my office at Temple University, and a guy who came from Mexico, who was an older guy and who had made apparently a fortune in some sort of business, he came to interview me for an article he was writing and for a class he was taking in journalism or whatever. I noticed that when he took out his pen, he wrote with a Mont Blanc pen. I don't know if you don't know what a Mont Blanc pen is, but they started a couple $100 or whatever. And it's the first time I'd ever seen a Mont Blanc pen at Temple University, and the first and only time. And he told me about this event. He'd seen a UFO once with some friends, and it was in the middle of Mexico City. Now, Mexico City has about 1 billion people in it. I think it's 14 million now or something.
Yes, that's right.
And they were in a park in the middle of New York City, and he said they laid down, they looked up, and they saw this UFO there, and everything went quiet. Well, that's not going to happen. Nothing is going to go quiet in the middle of Mexico City. Everything went quiet for them, and they looked at that, and they were astounded and amazed. And then it was over with, and they got up and they walked away. And I said, well, there's obviously going to be some missing time here or something, but I didn't. This is in my office. I wasn't about to. Yeah. So I said, well, did you when you walked away, this is a logical questioning, did you say, whoa, did you see that thing? Isn't that amazing? What was that? And, did you continue talking about it and all that? He said, no, we never talked about it again.
Yeah, and that I've heard this before. People say the same thing, and you can't escape from the truth. I mean, people will say to me, well, that obviously couldn't have happened, but I mean, I can't escape the truth of what I saw that day. And why would I have made that up when and have the whole family see that the same thing as well? And it was incredible. It really was. It was incredible.
There is nothing that you can gain from making that up.
Not really.
Other than having people think that you're crazy.
Yeah, which none of us want to feel that way. Not when we're not balanced. Right. People don't want to feel that way normally. So it's I can relate to that a bit as well. Now, earlier, I mean, this is a fascinating interview. Your work is just incredible. Just going back to what you were saying earlier on about through regression, they were talking about friends that they don't know who they are, they don't know where they are, but they're helping out. So how the heck are they making the time then unconsciously to work with these they're not called hybrids, are they? They're hybrids. Sorry, what are they called? What do you call them?
What I did is I invented a new term for the ones who are actually living here, because there are all sorts of hybrids who are involved with a certain kind of bureaucracy that is involved, who are not living here. But the hybrids are the ones, as they say, their task is to live here. And so I just use the word human and hybrid and put them together.
No, hybrids is cool. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But it just clarifies who we're talking about. That's the only reason. Yeah. So for the hybrids who are living here, they're dealing with people oftentimes at night when they should be asleep and they're not.
Right.
Or during the day if they're like Betsy, for example, and this is living alone. Her kids are in school, her husband's away at work. She works at home. And so they would come, and she would teach them how to go shopping, or teach them how to drive, or whatever it is that she needed to teach them to do.
So these hybrids would come to people, almost abduct them in a sense without taking them away, but sort of hypnotize them in a way to work with them and help them. Is that right?
Here's the difference between hybrids, aliens, and us. All of them can control us neurologically, and we cannot control them. That makes them a first-class species and makes us a second-class species. And this is not a good situation. We want them to be a second-class species and for us to be a first-class species. With that kind of control, that neurological control, they can make anybody think anything or do anything or see anything that they want. How they do this is not, I don't understand how this is done, because there's energy that goes obviously from one brain to another and affects that brain in a specific way with great detail. And so I don't, all I know is that every single person says this. Excuse me, there's an animal on my lap.
The cat can take its place on the show.
And that's Carrie. She's wonderful.
Hi, Carrie.
So they can do that. So as soon as they're in proximity to an abductee, whether it's on the street or in their home or whatever, I have expanded the definition of abductions to include that they can, as long as they're in control in any location, that person is basically abducted. They will do whatever they need to do, and they will forget what happened during a 2-hour or 3-hour period in the middle of the day. And if somebody calls them on their cell, they miss the call. Nothing interrupts it. And or on their mobile phone, I should say, nobody is going to answer a phone call while they're in the process of an abduction event. But they have to do that because they can't be awake and aware. The first thing they do is they run to a constable and say, "That man has kidnapped me." Yeah. Or whatever, and the constable will investigate. Of course, the constable will think that this is the nicest human being he ever met, and they could never. The person who said it is wrong.
That's right. Well, this leads absolutely. I mean, this is fascinating. So this leads on to, would you say they want to be in power? They want to be in government. They want to be in corporations. Is that the way to take over? If they were, I mean, I don't believe they're here to take over. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, if that was, we've got to look at it, be sensible about it. But if they were, I mean, it's not about invading nowadays, is it? As in the sense of a war, it's more of the way to invade is through taking over corporations, getting into government, getting into politics. Would you say that's not what they're looking for?
It is not what I have found, but I haven't found enough yet. I don't know enough. In other words, I have not investigated people who are in government, who are abductees, who are working with hybrids or hubrids to learn how to do their jobs. I don't know that. Excuse me here, there is an animal on my lap.
Kerry's making another appearance, it's fine.
So we don't know. What we do know, at the end of the book, I talk about one event, a so-called party. This woman said she remembers going to a party where people had drinks and they were talking with her, like a cocktail party.
Yes.
Well, when we did the event, when we looked at it, it wasn't a cocktail party. Although a couple of them had glasses of water or containers of water, and they were all standing around with other abductees, and some of the people who she had helped early on now were living here on their own, and they had jobs.
Right.
The jobs were basically like jobs for beginners who weren't even being paid. They were just overlooking. They were admitted in. They were watching other people do their jobs, or the one person who was an abductee doing his or her job, and everybody was fine with that. And so the other question then becomes, well, how do they get money? We don't exactly know that. My guess is that either abductees give them money, or they just walk into a bank and they ask the teller for money, and the teller is more than happy to give them money. It's
unless they're working here, unless they're working and they're part of society. I mean, is that possible? Some of them.
It is possible. It is possible that some of them are earning a wage. That some of them are. That is possible. It would be very easy for them to do that, but since they have to be taught everything, they're like trainees who are not being paid. At least the ones in this cocktail party the few who talked about it. She mentioned that they were just training type jobs.
So it's not a case where the hybrids, as you call them, are not aware of what they are, as in they're living a normal life as we would see it in society, and they're not aware of consciously who they are. They are aware of their background in a sense.
Yes, they grew up on a UFO. They know that, and their loyalty is to the ones above. And the ones above mean, now, it's not just gray aliens who are involved with the abduction phenomenon. Everybody talks about the gray aliens. On the internet, everybody talks about the reptilian-like ones, who I call reptilians. But the reptilian-like ones are just in a line of other ones as well. All of them make up the workforce. The ones who are in charge, are the insect-like ones, or I call them insectolents.
Insectolents.
They are order givers. Everybody else is an order taker. They control the show. They are not saying what the end game is here, and therefore we don't know. I don't.
Well,
abductees don't know.
Isn't it funny that since the kids have got matches, as in we've been experimenting with nuclear and we've detonated nuclear bombs as well, that they've started to appear. I wonder. I mean, if they're not.
They appeared beforehand. I have looked at several abductions from the 1940s. And two from the 1930s. My colleague Bud Hopkins did one regression with a guy who was a young kid in the 1920s. I read a letter that was obviously an abduction event that took place in 1917. And through family histories, because it's intergenerational, we have some people have talked about what happened to their great-grandfather in the 1880s. So it dates back before the atomic bomb. It's got nothing to do with atomic energy, the atomic bomb.
But obviously the traffic has increased. What they're doing now, these hybrids as well. That wasn't around back then. I mean, this doesn't relate back to biblical
Correct.
times. Eric von Daniken, Chariots of the Gods. This is a new phenomena in the past century, right?
Yes.
So now I'm going to go in a different way here, just to think about just for a minute, because everything's on the table right now in the sense, yeah. I think it could be, right?
Not everything.
Well, just hear me out, right? It's just, to not say it is just as bad, for the people who poo-poo this work as well. But what if they're here on a different mission, on a spiritual one? What if they, as the more advanced you get, the more of oneness you get to, as in we care about fellow people, fellow species in a sense, and they want to help us, and they're helping us in a way that we can't understand. Is that why we've not blown ourselves up maybe and had World War III yet?
Well, it's like...
and it's unanswerable, I know.
Edward Bellamy said in a novel he wrote in the 1890s, wouldn't it be pretty to think so? There's no indication whatsoever that they have any knowledge of something that might be spiritual, religious, transformational,
no, not religious,
or anything
not religious,
like that.
Beyond that, but something more than that. It's almost like they maybe know the true essence of maybe more than we do of where the consciousness comes from in a sense, and that there is a connection deeper than just this life. You know what I mean? That something carries on, and they're in contact with that in a sense. Just saying.
Wouldn't it be pretty to think so? Once again, you can speculate. You can speculate about a million things. But I the only thing that I've speculated on is the fact that they have the ability to do this. They are doing this, and it benefits them in some way. And they wouldn't do it if it didn't benefit them. In my opinion.
But would it?
They might be helping humans. There is absolutely no evidence for that I or my colleague Bud Hopkins were able to uncover.
As far as we understand.
I would like that.
As far as we understand.
I want that.
Yeah, sure.
That would be great. I would dance with joy. That would be wonderful. That's not what people tell me. That is not what people tell me. And I've worked with people who are ministers and people who are very spiritual and all the rest of that stuff, and they all say the same thing. One person was heavily into the New Age, and so much so that even when she talked with me, I couldn't understand. I didn't know all the words she was saying. It was I couldn't understand. It was like a different language. So we did one session. She was abducted in the middle of New York City. And this does happen. Wow. It was at night, and this happened to her, and that happened to her, and this happened to her, and that happened to her, and this happened to her, and that happened, this happened, and then in the end, okay. Then she wrote me a letter saying that she was never coming to see me again because she didn't remember what she wanted to remember.
Okay.
She had built this construct in her mind of these wonderful beings who are here to help us and all. But what she remembered was basically standard abduction stuff that everybody else was telling me.
Yeah, the scary stuff, yeah.
So, right, and she didn't like that. She would rather live in her own mind and that's fine. Yeah, that's her. It's her life. It's not mine. Yeah. I do not charge for anything that I've done. I don't accept money. When people send me money, I send it back. I do nothing like that happens. They can come as many times as they want. I spend hours and hours with them. 5 hours is in general the average. Not doing hypnosis the whole time, but talking with them for an hour, doing hypnosis for a couple hours, talking with them another hour, whatever. And so I don't have any stake in this. I'm going where they're leading me. And if they were to lead me into a spiritual awakening, fine. Okay, I'm okay with that. That's fine. That is not what they have done, including ministers I've worked with 5 people who are ministers essentially, and they all say the same thing, And I wish that the speculation that this is something spiritual or to benefit mankind, I wish that was the case. I really do. But it's not what people tell me. That's all I can go by. The evidence that I've accrued over
and I will,
almost 30 years of doing
absolutely,
it.
David. And I will say that I'm just putting it on the table. I'm not saying it's right. I don't know what to think right sometimes in regards to this. But I'm not going to not include it. A lot of people would not go there or include that because fear sells and fear is quite attractive. I'm just saying, well, let's just look at the opposite as well. That's what I'm saying. That we don't know yet, do we? But as you say, it's based on what they're saying. It's a very scary experience with very little empathy from the beings that are there. There's no love in this experience, neither as far as they feel in the recollection of the regression. But nevertheless, we're still pretty blind. But like you've said earlier on, we know it's happening. And you did touch on telepathy as well earlier on. We were going to just look at that briefly as well, the telepathy side of the research.
Right. Well, all communication on board, and I shouldn't say all because sometimes there are hybrids on board, and sometimes they will speak. It's rare, but sometimes they will speak orally.
Right.
But on board a UFO. But the fact is, though, that all communication is telepathic. Now, if this were psychological, to go back to the older argument, people would tell me, because they wouldn't know that, especially in the years ago, they would say, I would say, well, how are they speaking to you? How do you know? Well, they're speaking to me through their mouths. What are you talking about? They've got strange accents. They're weird accents. But what do you mean? How are they talking to me? We get that all the time, but we virtually never get that because it's all telepathic. And there's no reason to say telepathic. Once again, it puts a barrier of belief into their accounts. And years and years ago, in the famous British UFO magazine, Flying Saucer Review, the best UFO magazine ever done, there was an article called "The Speech of the Aliens," which had all sorts of groans and croaks and clicks and this and that, all sorts of things that people said that they heard in some way. If when aliens saw them outside of a UFO, they didn't know anything about the abduction phenomenon. And of course, that was all confabulation. That had nothing to do with reality because people just don't. Not only that, but there's something else about telepathy that's very bizarre. Abductees hear their telepathic messages, get up on the table, or now we're going to go over here, or whatever it is, and sometimes they will overhear 2 aliens talking, gray aliens, exchanging information with each other, and they hear it, let's just say, in English. Or, and I'm guessing now, they hear it in their own native language of Urdu, because otherwise they wouldn't know how to, and the question is there in fact a native alien language? We don't know that. I can't say absolutely. We have never heard them speaking a language that abductees can't understand telepathically.
That's incredible. This is just an amazing interview. and obviously, just very quick, because I know we're getting to the end here as well. You know, you can see this in previous interviews with yourself. There is forensic material reports that you've had as well, from fetuses, removed as well.
Yes, there was a man named Roger Lear who used to remove implants from people. Now, all people have implants. The preferred areas of implant that almost everybody talks about is through the through the nose, into the nasal cavity, through the cartilage, all the way up probably near the pituitary gland. The second way is through the ears, puncturing the eardrum all the way into somewhere in the brain somewhere or near the brain. And then down through a sinus cavity in the eye, through the eye into the sinus cavity. Those are three main ways. Then other people have odd objects behind their ear, on their arms sometimes on their legs, back of their knees, whatever. And he specialized, having a team of physicians removing these things, and he found a couple of them had really strange qualities to them and oddities. Oh, yeah. But they were not able to understand what they did and why. If these were actual implants, if they were in fact alien implants, and you can't do that if technology is so advanced and you've got this thing, you can't figure out what it is. Then you see what I mean. Roger died a few years back, and I'm not sure what happened to his collection of implants, to tell you the truth. I would like to know that, because we'd like to have other people look at that.
Exactly.
But there's another problem here. The scientific and academic community is not interested in this subject. They used to be interested. There used to be a group of scientists and academics who are interested in the subject, and there still are. They're all my age, about 109. The ones who are still alive are still there. There's very few new ones. There's very few younger people who are interested in the subject. And they're now, for the first time, and I've been involved with this for almost my entire adult life, the academic and scientific community is overtly hostile to the subject. It's not like they're not interested in it. They ridicule it. They're hostile about it. They say things on television against it. It's just astounding. It's regressed. It hasn't progressed. It's regressed.
Well, then the government programs of disinformation, then, if they do exist, are working.
Here's the way I look at people who study disinformation and conspiracy and all that sort of stuff. I don't see it as a historian. Does not appear in American society. And if it's there, if they are spreading disinformation, if they are studying it, if they are having a conspiracy, if they've squirreled it away somewhere, I would dance with joy. It would be the greatest thing I ever heard in my life. It would be wonderful, because I would know at least they're looking at it.
Yeah.
If they want to keep it from me, fine. I can go along with that. Well, but I do not see, as a professor of 20th century U.S. history, and you want to spend another half an hour with me, I can tell you exactly how that works and why it's probably not true that they're covering up. Okay.
Well, unless there was disinformation programs years and years and years ago that were running, and they've just served their purpose and they work now. Hence why you felt you're looked down to want to get involved in such subjects. I don't know. I'm just putting that
There's
out there.
Other reasons for it that make more sense, actually.
Yeah, I'm sure. No, absolutely. I'm sure there is. Now, just finally, right? These people are among us, right?
I used to hate that question, because I got to say no, they're not.
I know.
That's ridiculous. Now the answer is yes. Yeah. The evidence has pushed me to saying
and
yes.
They would look just as normal as me and you would look. Otherwise, the program wouldn't be working, in a sense, if they didn't. Yeah.
Right. They go for the average.
Yep. Exactly.
Anything that makes them stand out, they're culled from the herd.
Right. Timothy Good, UFO researcher in the UK, he always talked about...
Yeah, I know Tim Good, yeah.
He talked about a case where he went into a hotel and he had mind contact, telepathy contact, with this extraordinary person that was in this lobby. Other people have talked about these times where they've just communicated. They've telepathy put the question out there: who are you? Are you from this planet? Because they've had a feeling that there's just something very strange about these people. Not something that you'd normally do, but they were compelled to do it. and they had a response back, and they can't explain these situations. So, you know, when someone like Timothy Good talks about stories like this, you sort of think, well, maybe this is a possibility that they are here.
Yes, I'm going to agree with that. And it can't happen at random like that. They wouldn't allow that. But there are reasons for it, both from the abductee side and from the hybrid side. There are logical reasons for it. I know that we can't go into that now, but that does happen from time to time.
What is the most important message of your work, would you say, David?
Run. No, I don't know. Nobody's interested in this. People are interested in it. Here's the thing. There's a guy named Mike Mencken who makes hats that are filled with Velocet, and he says this stops abductions because they can't control people's minds. It stops the energy. He may indeed be right. He might be onto something. I think he is, in fact. What we need is intelligent people, people with IQs much higher than mine, who can get together and try to figure this thing out before it's too late, unless it's already too late, of course, and deal with it. And I just don't see that happening now. What we need, major scientists, neurologists, and physicists, and whatever else we need to sit down seriously and understand what the evidence is and go through it and try to figure it out. And that's not happening. I mean, what I live for right now is to just put all this behind me and watch the telly for the rest of my life. I would be happy if other people take over and do it, but I'm not happy about the future. I wish I could give degrees of happiness and benevolence and all the rest of that stuff. I just can't do it. I want to, but the evidence has led me in one direction, and that's it.
Okay. Well, look, it's just been an honor to have you on the show, someone of your caliber as well, someone who's done this research through all these years, and hats off to you for what you're doing and the difference that you are making, even though sometimes you may feel you're not, but you are, by just cataloging the evidence that you've done and chasing the evidence. So I applaud you for that, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you for those kind words, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Well, I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show, and don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.